Hi, everybody. Piper, I just saw your message. That's great. Piper is at the DMV and she's listening on her phone, I think. Oh, and there's a baby. Yay. David, right?
Hello.
Yes. And
Hi, David. Oh, hi. How are you? The whole family.
yes.
Very nice.
We'll be turning off. Oh,
oh,
look at
Mike, look at that.
that.
Joseph, how's your first couple months of being a big brother?
It's
Thumbs up?
really good.
It sounds like it.
I'm learning how he feels and also of how he's very poopy.
Yeah, very poopy. That's a big
Yay,
part of
poopies.
it.
Not only does he want to eat me.
All right.
I have to
You have to go. You go to class.
Oh, I thought it was the other type of go. I was like, okay. Yeah.
No.
stop looking at me.
Piper says to Joseph, "You're a great student of David, Joseph."
He is a great student of David.
That's good. That's really good.
He's always, I'm sure you guys, those of you who have more than one kid are used to it. He's like, I think he's hungry, mommy, or mommy, I think he what, like he's constantly interpreting what the baby wants.
It's so good. That's so great. Yeah. And how's the sleeping going at this point? Yeah. Yeah.
I need sleep.
Are they very different babies? Were they very different babies?
Yeah. Joseph definitely slept for longer periods of time, but he doesn't, knock wood, he doesn't cry at night. Like he wakes up, he's hungry, you feed him, he goes back to sleep. He wakes up a lot more.
Yeah.
But
not a crier.
Yeah.
What a dream.
Yeah, so far it's good. It would be nice if he slept for long periods of time, but at least he goes back to sleep, and that's, at least it's interrupted, but it happens.
Yeah. All right. Well, Julie asked me to record because she couldn't be here. So if everybody's comfortable with that. Oh, wait, I guess we're already recording. There we go. If anybody wants me to turn off the recording at any time, for sharing or whatever, just you can let me know in the chat or whatever. But maybe this will be a useful thing to have up on the Community of Practice page, a recording of this workshop. So as with pretty much any of the workshops I've led at GCC, I always kind of want to say in the beginning that I hope this will be more of a conversation than just me presenting, because I realized I made up a little Google Slides, and I realized as I was doing it that almost everything in it came from all of you, like things I've learned from talking to all of you over the last several years. And so please, I'm sure you have a lot of great ideas that I haven't included in the presentation, and I would love to hear them, and feel free at any time to unmute yourself and add a suggestion or illuminate a point, because I think sort of the best workshops we have happen when we're all sort of collaboratively sharing our ideas and expertise. So there was something else. Does anybody need, it seems like everybody here is pretty familiar with growth mindset. Is there anybody that would like a 1 minute kind of recap of that, or are we all pretty good on that? Looks like we're all good on it. Okay. All right, then I'm gonna attempt to share my screen. Well, actually, before I do this, I was gonna, before I go into sort of suggestions and ideas, I would love it if you guys would share in the chat, if you have free hands and are not holding a baby, what specific sorts of challenges, or you're not at the DMV, what specific sorts of challenges you face with getting students to read or respond to your comments or understand them. You know, what are the ways in which what are some of the specific ways in which you sense or are concerned that students aren't making the most of your comments? What sorts of obstacles are you seeing? And I guess, and we could also just do this verbally. I guess the other piece of the question is, are you noticing a shift from in-person to online or remote classes in terms of how students respond or don't respond to comments? So either in the chat or just unmute yourself, whatever you prefer.
I kind of had a handle on this, but in talking to other instructors, I'm just seeing it all over the place. I see, panel after panel where the pictures are blacked out and the students just don't respond, okay, to anything verbally, and even less so. Sometimes they don't even read the comments, but I realize they may be on handheld devices. So I'm going to switch to voice. But I also have heard from instructors and in other divisions too that just say that, and I've got one class this semester that's just, they're insanely participatory. And the other two, it's really different. And I'm not sure why.
I see Sarah saying in a fully online class, finding a way to make sure students are reviewing feedback and or creating additional work for me without creating additional work for me. Sorry, Sarah. Or the perception of busy work for them. Yeah. If reviewing feedback, responding to it, it doesn't feel like busy work. Yeah. So how to avoid making it busy or having it seem like busy work. And Jessica's saying, I don't think a lot of them read the comments. Tone is often a problem. They think you're angry. Yeah. I felt like the English division retreat last January was so helpful in terms of giving me some sort of sentence frames for changing my tone and my commenting. Piper, I like Chris's way of requiring that students respond to his comments. Yeah, I do too. That's something we'll talk about. I realize that if I leave multiple comments in different submissions through SpeedGrader, they don't read all of them. Yeah. And here's Maggie. Other thoughts from people about Susan? This semester, I've tried out the idea of not posting the essay grade until the student has responded to my extensive comments. I'm alarmed that I have not yet heard from students about a unit essay that I graded a week ago. Do they not want to know? Interesting. I've heard of that. Hostages, Viper, but yeah, I've heard of that technique before too. So Susan, I'll be really interested to hear how that goes. Does anybody else do that? Not give the grade until they've responded to comments?
I believe I got the idea from Piper. See her note above.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I missed that.
That's okay. Don't blame you.
Okay. So those of you who are just coming in, we're talking about what sorts of obstacles we're facing in terms of getting students to read comments, take them in, and improve in response to them. So feel free to chime in with others. I'm going to start talking about a few things we can do, but as I said a few minutes ago, I hope this will be a conversation. I'm sure many of the things in the presentation I stole shamelessly from all of you. So please feel free to chime in at any point, unmute yourselves. Sean, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that one thing that we often don't talk about is the students who are already doing really well and how they interact with the comments. I feel like once they get their good grade, they're like, done, just click, set this on repeat, where I'm often like, I really feel like you're doing really good, but I feel like there's room for improvement. And that's another like subset of the student population that I think that we should be including in this conversation.
That's a great point. I can't remember what the assignment was, but I just had some students respond to comments, and it was like a few students who'd gotten like 92, 94. They were just like, they tuned out once they saw their grade. They sort of felt like they were fine. And yeah, so I think that's a really good point. All right, well, I'm going to start going through my very brief presentation if I can find it. And chime in as you see fit. Let me get to the beginning of this. One of the things I thought of a lot as I was working on this is that it took me a long time to really think about how to prepare students for comments, that I just kind of, even though I know from 20 years of teaching that the day I give back comments, especially in a developmental class, can be a really difficult day for students, I wasn't doing anything to sort of help them with that or scaffold it for them or prepare them for it or talk about how they might prepare themselves for it. So I realized as I was thinking about this workshop that a lot of what I have learned and would recommend to other teachers is how important it is to lay the groundwork for comments. I think a big part of that is having some sort of framework in your class for talking about sort of the process of, you know, trying to do something well and getting feedback on it and, you know, trying to improve and getting more feedback, that students need sort of a way to think about that part of the class. And of course, I think, you know, the framework I always choose in my class is to make sure early in the semester, within the first or second week, I talk about the growth mindset and the fixed mindset. I think those terms are super useful. And my experience has been, if I introduce those terms, the research on growth mindset early in the semester, that it becomes sort of part of the culture of the class and is sort of a really useful framework for talking about every challenge the students face in the class, including how they may feel about comments or grades. And just a reminder that there are tons of resources on the 101 and 101 Plus community resource, community of practice pages. There's a chart, which I can show you, that sort of breaks down the difference between the growth mindset and the fixed mindset. And there are videos and articles that show how students who cultivate a growth mindset do better academically, are more likely to develop proficiency in any area, that kind of thing. And I think a lot of you know, I know I probably sound like a broken record. There's a downloadable Canvas module on the growth mindset, which students can complete in about 30 minutes. It does not repeat the exact same stuff that the Keys workshop goes over. It's a different type of intervention. And of course, you can send your students to the Keys workshops. And of course, there are lots of resources on the Community of Practice page for doing just a brief 15-minute explanation of the fixed and growth mindsets in your class. So I really encourage you, if you haven't already, to sort of define those terms early in the semester, because they'll be very useful to you to refer back to throughout the semester. I've told this story a lot, so forgive me if you've heard it, but a few years ago, I started defining growth and fixed mindset about 10 years ago, and I've had really good results from it. And a few years ago, I was passing back papers, the first papers of the semester, and one of my students looked at his grade and he sort of slammed his paper down and he said, "Oh, I suck at writing essays." And this other guy in the class turned to him and he goes, "Hey man, don't have a fixed mindset." And it was like the first time, it was like I didn't need to say anything. And it was just this beautiful moment, like they get it. And if they have the information, they can help each other with it. So define those terms early in the semester. It doesn't take long. I'm happy to help if you have any questions about the best ways to do that. Yeah, as you can tell, I love talking about it. So, but if you prefer other frameworks, I think Habits of Mind can be really useful. There's a habit remaining open to continuous learning, and obviously comments can be linked to that. Another thing that we do in the Keys workshops that I've started doing in my 101 plus and 101 is I do this as a check-in assignment now that I'm teaching fully online, but it could certainly, I used to do it in in-person classes sometimes too. Oh, there goes my landline. Hold on just a sec.
Landline. Wow.
I know. It's a thing. I mostly use it to like dial my cell phone to find out when it's lost. I want to hear about audio comments, Piper, when we get there, and read. Another thing I've been doing that I think can be a really useful framework for a class is to ask students about one thing they do well and how they learn to do it well. Doing that at the beginning of a class is great as like a check-in icebreaker, because everybody then comes in sharing an asset, sharing a strength, which is really nice. And then we talk about how the learning process doesn't change, whether it's soccer or skateboarding or writing essays, that they all involve, all of it is about trying, making mistakes, having other people give you suggestions, that idea of working towards proficiency. The process is really very similar in a lot of different areas. And so if you've talked with a student about one thing they do well and how they learn to do it well, that may be something you can refer back to when they're struggling, when they got a bad grade. Well, how did you handle it when, you almost flunked algebra in 10th grade? How did you get better at it? What did you do? So that can be a useful framework too. I also think it's really important directly before giving students comments and grades, in particular, if possible, in an English class before they get their first paper back, to create some space to allow them to reflect on feedback and what it means. And these can be discussions on Canvas, they can be free writing activities. They don't have to take a long time. Sometimes in my 101 plus, before students get their first paper back, we just return to growth mindset. What do we know about how people with a growth mindset handle criticism? What do we know about how people with a fixed mindset handle it? How are you going to handle it? So just, it doesn't have to be a long involved activity, but just a reminder that part of cultivating a growth mindset is handling criticism well and learning from it and using it and seeing it as an opportunity for growth, which is not always easy, but just sort of reminding students of that before they get their first papers back, if possible, can be really powerful and not super time consuming. I put on here the question, why do instructors give grades? Why do they comment? Which I know seems incredibly basic, but I actually, one of the best discussions I've ever had in a developmental class was when I asked this question. And I don't know why I was surprised, but of course, when I said, why do instructors give grades, it was all about judgment. And, for students, it felt like, well, they have to, define who the strong students are and the weak ones are. And I mean, there were just some really shocking, pretty kind of upsetting responses. And it was really useful to kind of unpack it. And, I mean, just the idea, I remember saying to that class, grades and comments and quizzes and tests, they're not just for you, they're for me, because I need to know how I'm doing. And that was really shocking to a lot of those students. And so to talk about, why, and just talking about grades and comments as information for both the students and for me, I feel like it helped. But anyway, it might be an interesting experiment in your class. I think especially in developmental classes, 101 plus or 101, that it can be really surprising to hear how students respond to that. And it can really give you an opportunity to sort of reframe some of students' attitudes about grades and comments. And then one of my favorite, this is just tonight, there are lots of good quotes you could use. Sue's saying in comments, I always try to include the line, here's what you can, that's great. Here's what you can do better next time. Yeah, we'll do better next time. Yeah. And I feel like I've been missing things in the chat after encouraging people to chime in. I want to hear about audio comments in about 1 or 2 slides. Yes, Jessica says, I try to have my final comment include the one compliment, not always easy. I try to do 3, but sometimes it's really a struggle to find that third one. I try to make sure I've made 3 positive comments. So there are a lot of great quotes in Mindset by Carol Dweck that you could use as free writing prompts or discussion prompts. One of my favorite is Carol Dweck writes that the fixed mindset turns other people into judges instead of allies. What does she mean? So I think that's a really important shift that students need to make. I often say to students, I write a lot of comments. I know it's kind of hard to see all my comments on your beautiful paper, to see all this ink when you get it back, or teardrops on canvas, but I'm writing those comments because I have faith in you, because I know you can do better. And, even if it feels like judgment, it's actually, I see what you're doing and I know how to help you do it better. I like Piper has good instinct to do X works well because just scrolled up. Because I can also say this could be a way to capitalize on that instinct. That's nice. If you decide to revise, Maggie says, Cynthia says, I have to be careful about being too blunt after a few hours of grading. Yeah, I get into fact mode and have to review what I said. Yeah, I've caught some of that with me. Yeah, I think we all have to kind of remember that they can't hear our tone. And so we have to be really, really careful. And maybe audio comments. I don't know, do some people want to chime in about audio comments? Do you feel like, how is that working? Anybody want to unmute themselves and share their experiences with audio?
I've only been doing audio comments, honestly, and filling out the rubric on the side, you know, but for me, the SpeedGrader interface is just so clunky. It takes so much time that I would rather just hit the record, and that can be clunky too, because it doesn't work perfectly. But I've been finding that to be really helpful, and I end up usually talking too much, you know, so my comments might get into 8 minutes. So that's too long, 8 to 10 minutes sometimes. But I try to like scroll through the paper and maybe take the writer through it. And it would be nice, of course, if Canvas would let you actually do a screen share and you could scroll through the paper and point to things. And you could do that with Screencast-O-Matic or something, but it takes a lot of time. But anyway, I like the audio comment very much, because it can be more conversational and personal, and tone is there. And of course, they have to think about it much more deeply. It's not even as direct as putting the comment in that spot. So, you know, it's on them to kind of listen to it and take themselves back through the paper and examine it. But that takes some effort.
Yeah.
But they should be doing that, obviously, you know.
Yeah. Sean, I saw you had your name. Oh, you had your hand up?
I just realized it's better for a chat, so I put it in the chat if someone can
Okay.
answer it.
In early versions of SpeedGrader, the audio comment required Flash to play, which means some students couldn't hear my comments. Is that still
They fixed that, thank goodness.
nice?
Yeah, they fixed that. Well, Flash is no longer a thing, but it seems to be better. Sometimes it doesn't save correctly though, but what you were talking about, Sean, with it actually saving to a different student or something like that, I think they fixed that part. So it's better than it was. It could be much better, but I think it's an improvement. And just doing the audio and no video seems to be okay too. I think, I mean, a video would be nicer, but that's too much pressure, too exhausting to do that. So just kind of talking in like the cassette tape, which I think the cassette tape would be even better, you know. if we could just, when we're back in person, right, you know, that would be fun. But
Sarah,
you know,
you had
that's not going
something?
to work.
I was just gonna say, well, I think I heard someone else talking too. Is somebody else talking? No? Okay,
No.
I was gonna say Julie and Sandy did a really great presentation on humanizing. There've been so many good presentations on humanizing DE instruction, but for division chairs. And one of the things I really took away from that too is that they were really recommending try out audio and video comments if you haven't done so, and then also be really strategic about the assignment. You know, maybe you're not ready to jump in and do everything, but what would be an assignment that would allow you, especially if you're teaching fully online, to make that kind of humanized connection with your students? And it might be a low stakes kind of discussion post response or the like too. So just to try it out. And I thought that went along really well to that article that Piper sent out this morning about doing the short videos. I know it's a really different kind of video, but at the same time, I think, you know, to me, these types of audio comments can be that kind of personal, you know, educational, but also humanizing connection. So I just like the idea of being like really strategic, like where could I make the most difference? Because if it's not something you can commit to time-wise, like where can you get the most bang for the buck?
Mm-hmm. I know Piper was at the DMV, but Piper, you've done the Screencast-O-Matic, and if you can't talk about this now, you can just tell us in the chat. I think you've done the Screencast-O-Matic where you go through, so it's video and audio and you go through the paper. And I would just, if you felt comfortable, I would love to see an example of that if there was a student comfortable with having you share theirs, because is it, I guess my big question is it incredibly time consuming? Okay, great. No, okay, good. And have you guys gotten any feedback from students? Those of you doing audio and video comments, do they give you any information about, you know, whether it was easier for them or they liked it better, or it felt more personal? Title should be oh, in the comments field. Yeah, yeah. There's a lot you can't do in the comments in Canvas. Reed, have you gotten any feedback from your students on audio comments? Any sense from them?
The main sense is that most students like them. I
Okay.
haven't ever gotten a negative comment about, you know, usually it will raise questions or something, but to me, I feel like I can say so much more. And even in my meandering way, my Southern way, they have to wade through. And, you know, I've tried to simplify, but it's not always easy. So they wade through it, and I think they are at least thinking about their writing in maybe a deeper way than just looking very briefly at the comments, if they even do that. Of course, it's still really tough for students to even find that feedback, and sometimes they find it sort of at the last minute of the revision cycle, and that's too bad. But, you know, if you keep pushing them for reflection on the comments and things like that, that helps. But then that creates more busy work. And then we're back, I think, to one of the dilemmas that's always been part of our job, is spending so much time on each paper.
Mhm.
And, you know, we're trying to get it down to like 8 minutes per paper and whatnot. And that's not happening for my side, I can tell you.
Yeah.
It's probably 15 minutes per paper. And that's too much, even for a draft, because you got to read through it, think about what you're going to say.
Yeah.
And you might have a couple stumbles in your audio comment, and then you have to redo it, or it doesn't save. So I don't think it cuts down on any time, which was my hope. But I do think that it, you know, it's worth the effort.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit easier than trying to wade through the paper and put the little pin and write a little comment. You know, I find that so clunky, but it's a personal thing. So it may not work for everybody,
Yeah.
but I recommend it.
I have a fast question. Sarah, years ago, wasn't there a survey that it took between 15 and 17 minutes to grade a 101 essay?
I don't remember that, but that sounds like what, I think that's where many people start in the process. Maybe not the last paper, if I'm being totally honest.
Ah, okay, thanks.
Maggie, I saw your question and I wanted to hear, could you tell us a little bit? I think you're writing on the papers in the Canvas app. My mind was blown. Tell us more. Could you tell us more?
Yeah, I just handwrite on the paper in the Canvas app. In iOS, you can just handwrite on it. So
That's
what I do.
amazing.
Yeah.
If anybody needs a stylus, we can.
Yeah, you need a stylus. You need a good stylus because that makes a difference. But yeah, so I used to do it I had a first generation iPad mini, and up until last year I was using that. And then this year I got a new iPad and I'm using that now, and they work the same. It's just, you just open it up in the iOS app and you can just mark it up like normal. And then it's automatically there for your students. So
That's great.
Yeah, I will buy you if you're gonna use it, especially if you test it out and you know you like it, Piper. Yeah, we have a good budget for these types of things. I think we could probably use pandemic money too.
Piper is wondering if we can
Try,
get
yeah.
iPads.
Yeah, I think we can. I think I can talk to, yes, divisions have been purchasing iPads for instructional purposes, especially for areas where they've used it for kind of like multiple screen setups and the like. But yeah, I can double check with Michael, but I think we could use some of the pandemic funding. And then also we could look into our supply budget if you want to give it a try to make sure it's a good fit first, just, you know, to test it out. But then, yeah, certainly styluses. And if you didn't have an iPad, I'm thinking we could probably do that.
That's great.
How clear are the, is it pretty legible? Maggie, you must have perfect handwriting. I know you do. I'm sure you do. Come on.
I do not have perfect handwriting. Let me see if I can find something that doesn't have any
Something
student
wrote
information.
on, that would be awesome. But,
Yeah.
you know,
All right, well, chime in when you find it, Maggie. One thing also, I think it's really important when students get comments or before they get comments is to acknowledge that it's an emotional thing. This is a big sort of soapbox I get on, that what we're doing with these students is a very emotional process, especially for those, you know, we all know, we've all heard stories about how traumatized some of our students have been by past experiences in English class. And I think it's really important to talk about what happens emotionally when you've worked really hard on a paper and you get a grade lower than you expected, and you feel discouraged by comments, and how we handle that. This again can be a really short free write or discussion on a Canvas page. I've said this to Shant before. I think sort of 80% of the impact of the Keys workshops is students hearing other students' stories of feeling measured, of feeling like they can't do something, of overcoming those feelings. Sort of just letting students sort of share their sort of, you know, moments where they felt really vulnerable and really criticized, just reminds other students that that's part of this process, and that it's not just an intellectual or cognitive process, it's an emotional thing they're going through. And I think acknowledging that can just be really powerful for students. Maggie, were you going to show us a sample, or do you want?
Yeah, if you want. I have, I forgot that I actually uploaded one that was a sample to show students how to get to comments. So.
Okay, I should stop sharing and you can share?
Yeah, so this is how clear it is.
Wow.
You do have neat handwriting.
yeah, it's kind of the perfect teacher handwriting, you know?
That
It
is-
has all the curly cues and you know, everything that we need in there.
Well,
You-
I'll
you-
tell you what, this is the first semester I've ever had multiple students say that they've not learned how to write handwriting.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Oh, wow.
That got me for a while too. Yep.
So now I have to print.
I had to
Because
start
they
printing.
didn't learn cursive.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right. Yep.
Wow.
So, and I still type an end note on it, like down here as well, but on the line comments, I do that.
That's one thing that I actually liked in person, is that my handwriting sometimes was not legible to students, also because I wrote in pencil and I would, you know, always be revising and erasing things sometimes. So, you know, I try to make it as legible as possible in print, but sometimes they'd be wondering like, oh, what does that say? And it was actually a great opportunity to have a little conversation about that moment in the paper. And, you know, that was such a valuable thing, and that's a huge loss for us right now. But, you know, of course, in Zoom office hours, you might be able to work through some of that, but especially if you handwrite, you know. But I like that part, you know. Back to the analog, I think there's something there, even though we were trying to get away from it. So it's tough to figure out how to game this, because digital disconnects us even more. So
Yeah.
I don't know. That's not a helpful comment, but I just felt like saying it. I don't know.
The fixed mindset comment read. No,
I know,
I'm
I'm fixing that. I know. I have my record player back here. What am I doing? Stuck in the past. Got to get over it.
I use the word coaching a lot for commenting in my class. I think there are a lot of students who can apply growth mindset to any kind of athletic endeavor, but have a lot of trouble sometimes transferring that to anything academic. So I try to talk about my comments as coaching, as pushing. A lot of times when students, this maybe applies a little bit to what Shant was saying about the students, the advanced students, how do we help them when a student comes in with a really strong paper to a rough draft conference. I just always say, you're doing really well, and so I'm going to push you further because, I know you can do it. And that's sort of my job, to keep raising the bar. I talk a lot in 101 Plus with students about how moving from high school to college writing is like going from junior varsity to varsity, that it's very rare for a junior varsity player to excel in their first game on a varsity team, and that it takes a while to sort of get up to speed. Because often my students, especially in 101 Plus, their first essay grades are pretty low. In fact, I grade them pretty low because they're going to have a required revision, and I want to push them. And so I think sports metaphors often work really well. And obviously coaching is all about improving and strategy and learning from mistakes. All of that gets conveyed once you use that word. So I was 3/4 of the way through my first semester of teaching fully online before I realized many of my students, maybe as much as a half of my students, did not know how to find their comments on Canvas, even though I had a video for them about how to do it, even though I was giving them the link to the video every time they got an essay back. They weren't watching the video. They were not reading their comments. And I was completely horrified, not only because they needed to know what they improved on, but I feel like some of the most encouraging comments I write to my students are on their essays. And it made me realize I had a lot of really angry students that semester, and they were just looking at the grade. They weren't looking at any of the comments about what they were doing well. So I now do make it an explicit part of the work in the class to have them respond to comments. And I think I just stole this idea from Sandy Somo. I just give them 4 questions. I think they're, what did you do well on your essay? Name 2 things you did well. Name 2 things you can improve on. Name 2 grading codes I used and what they mean. I may be getting rid of my grading codes. There may be an extra step, but while I'm still using them, there's a handout that explains them. I want to make sure they know how to find the explanations of them. And then I think something like, what strategies are you going to use to revise this essay, or how are you going to approach the revision? Name 2 specific strategies or something like that. And they can copy and paste those 4 questions into the comments box and just write in their answers. It takes them 15 or 20 minutes. It's a low stakes writing assignment. I skim them when I go through and grade them. It takes me maybe 30 minutes to read a set of them, maybe. But it's made a huge difference. And it doesn't just make a difference in their revisions. It makes a difference. I mean, so many students, will email me and say, I can't figure out how to see my comments, even though I have a video, even though I have explanations posted. And so I get on Zoom with them and I can show them in 5 minutes. And then we're sort of over that hump. But if I don't assign the response to comments, students, I have learned the hard way, will go the whole semester not knowing how to see their comments. The other thing I would say is I would assign the response to comments due several days before the revision. I think my students have their first revision due Sunday night. I had the response to comments due Wednesday night. So there's time for them to really take them in. I assigned that this week I'm teaching a 102 and a 101 plus. And in my 102 class, I think 2 students didn't write the response. In my 101 class, something like half the class didn't do it. And I have now written them all, and some of them are, I've said, I'll give you a couple more days to do this, but you got to do this. But at least it's helped me identify that there are some students who don't know how to find the comments, because I do think it's kind of a technology issue on Canvas, that a lot of them just are too freaked out and can't figure out how to do it and can't ask. And so it's a good way for me to find the students who don't know how to see the comments and make sure they can. So, and like I said, it's not a lot more grading time for me, and it can make a huge difference for them. And then, obviously what we're talking here about is study skills and helping students develop study skills. So when they do improve in response to comments, just being really explicit with them about what they did. You really took in that comment, or, you had all these dropped quotations in your essay 1 and you fixed them all. So just kind of, narrating for them, you struggled and you improved. You took in this information and you used it to make your writing better. I think it's really important to make that really explicit, and to make it explicit when you witness progress. I feel like students really respond to it when you're very explicit about it. And then obviously, all of this is, all these suggestions are about establishing new routines in the classroom. That none of them are time consuming. Really, commenting is time consuming. And for me, frankly, the 30 minutes of grading their responses is well worth it to me, because I spend so many hours grading and writing comments, way too much time. I don't think I'm anywhere near 15 minutes a paper. But if I'm going to put in that time, I really want to make sure that my students are seeing what I'm writing. And I also think responding in the comments box, having my students respond in the comments box. Last night I was grading a set of those responses, and students, had comments about my comments. I'm glad you liked that part. I wasn't sure I could include that example, or that if it applied. And so then I can respond to, so we get a little dialogue going using the comments box, which is really nice. The other thing is I had a student who went into, how there's that little reply box under your comments box, under your comments, when you write a comment connected to a teardrop, there's that little reply. I had a student who replied to each one of my comments throughout the paper, which was not the instructions, but it was kind of cool. Some of them he just wrote, I got it, or he asked a question, and it was just, I don't think I have enough time to assign the response that way, because it takes a lot longer to go through. But it was really great, because the student and I were looking at very specific moments in the paper, and he was looking at those specific moments. So that can be another way to do it with them. I'm missing all sorts of stuff in the chat. Isn't there a setting on Canvas that displays your comments automatically on their Canvas desktops? Let's let's see. So what is this that displays your comments automatically on their Canvas desktops? Yes. Yes. Yeah, they are a lot of, I had students, took 3 weeks for them to figure out how to unlock pages in a Canvas module. You know, even though I'd written in like 8 different places, you have to go sequentially through. And I think last week I got an email, I can't unlock this quiz, you know, and so anyway, especially in first semester classes like 101 plus or 101. Piper has a question about the pin drop comments on their phones. They can read them on their phones, but I think they can only read one at a time. They don't all show up together. I have a big note in like 5 different places on my Canvas page that it is much easier to see comments and understand them and revise from comments if you're working not from the app, if you're working from the Canvas web page. And they can't, they have to click on them individually in the app. I definitely have noticed, I don't know if any of you all have noticed this too, that students who are not doing well in my class often are trying to do the whole class on their phone. So I've gotten a lot more explicit with students about how that is a real obstacle. And I'm reminding students constantly that the library is lending out Chromebooks and hotspots and all of that, but that it's going to be a real obstacle for them if they try to do it all on their phone. So that's most of what I have. I just always want to remind everybody, if anybody wants to talk about growth mindset or ways to do growth mindset interventions in their class, or anything about the affective domain, I love to talk about this stuff. I have all sorts of resources I can share. So email me if you have any questions. Sean, you had a hand.
I just wanted to say this semester I'm experimenting with bullet points in my comments. I want to see how this goes. My tendency is to write a short thesis or dissertation in response to student work. And I think that they're not reading it sometimes just because they're like, what are you talking about? I don't even want to write that much less read that much.
Yeah.
I have so much other stuff to read. And students are very accustomed to getting their information in very short, neat chunks. And I'm trying to replicate that. It actually takes me a little bit longer because now I have to try to see how I could kind of cram a lot of information in like 4 words without sounding like a caveman. Thesis, not so good. Make better. Bye. But it's a work in progress. I'm just thinking about it.
What other things are people noticing about, more beautiful children? Are people noticing about commenting and how to get students to respond to them? Cynthia has something. I have students take screenshots of Learning Center tutorials. Many of them fail to open the view feedback to the tutoring. Oh, so do they get extra credit, Cynthia, for attending tutoring?
So I actually have it as part of their grade in the course, and they turn in for each of the papers. They have to turn it into either Smart Thinking or to the Learning Center, and so then they get the Learning Center feedback, which you actually have to go back and say view feedback, and then it shows they'll send the screenshots of the tutoring session. Then I say I have to be able to see what the tutor said to you, and then I want you to comment on what the tutor said. So it's like commenting. And they are pretty responsive to that. And so I know that when they leave the class, they'll have tutors to go to, and it's keeping Shant really busy. Sorry, Shant.
I know I did the same thing. I think they got a little overwhelmed this past week. Sorry about that. Sounds like you need tutors.
We do need tutors. This is a good problem to have.
Yeah,
So,
it is. We need to send them to you.
I'm so glad smart thinking is back. Have you know, is smart thinking sort of exploding the same way tutoring is?
Yeah, our online tutoring partners help us learn a lot about what students want, because we get sort of the dashboard shows an aggregate sort of data of like how they're using tutoring and what they really want, which is, we have asynchronous writing tutoring now, and we're going to have asynchronous math next semester, and eventually all subjects will have an asynchronous component.
Wow.
Well, that's what students want. 400% increase in asynchronous tutoring.
Wow.
So the demand is there.
So that's with Learning Center tutors, asynchronous tutoring?
Oh yeah. As of right now, the majority of our tutoring in the Learning Center for writing is asynchronous.
So students upload a paper and the tutor gets back to them?
Mhm.
Wow.
So they have to like put in like, oh, this is what I'm working on. This is the prompt. This is what I'm concerned about, and try to at least approximate a conversation, which is what we would like to have in a real tutoring session.
Yeah.
Is it possible for students to share the actual prompt within the drop-off service? Can you upload files?
Yeah, they could attach a file to it, but most of them are, if I'm being completely honest, most people aren't doing, even though the prompt is, again, remarkably short. I could show you how I like totally caveman the thing, like just made it really, really tight, just like, what's your name? What's your prompt kind of about? Like very quick, like 4 words. And then like, what are you worried about? And then very, very fast. And they're still not responding to that. Even though the prompt comes up, it's pretty obnoxious. Asks them to do that, and then they don't do it and just submit the essay. And then my tutors are often thinking, I don't know exactly how to respond. So I tell them to fall back on their training about, developing goals, prioritizing concerns, things like that. But it's a lot for them to process, and we're seeing serious burnout. One of my favorite tutors has talked to me recently about maybe just not tutoring anymore, one of our writing tutors, because they're being slammed, and they're not used to the kind of workload that writing instructors, if we do this for a living, we're used to it, but they'll have like a 3-hour shift with, just 6 essays back to back to sort of, it's a lot to process, and then to write back and provide meaningful feedback and adhere to all the training while they're doing that. They're thinking on multiple levels, trying to do that and do it asynchronously. It's challenging. So if you do have great students, we'd love to have you recommend them. Sorry, I'm just using this as a pitch now. Good job.
No, that seems really important. And, I wish we could require that prompt. That would create a barrier that's unnecessary, but it sure would be helpful for that tutor. That would create even more demand, especially in the asynchronous, but it seems crucial. So maybe we can remind our students to share the prompts.
I always put that on my assignments. I say, if you go to get tutoring on this, make sure to upload the prompt. Because I always really struggled with that tutoring when a student came in with the paper, but not the prompt. It was always like kind of flying blind.
And I do think now we're at the point where everyone is, maybe one of the best things about campus is that at least all the prompts are written out.
Yeah.
At this point, we weren't there 3 years ago. So, but yeah, they have to prompt. Oof. And yes, the idea about the MA candidates, and like, I know Shant and I have talked about this a little bit, and hopefully we'll be able to do some more around that. Terrific. And I know, Reed, you've talked about in the spring having one of the things we can keep working on for 101 kind of specifically was thinking about doing the kind of the common comments, which we kicked around a lot as a topic, where we as a division might come up with a short video comment, kind of a humanizing comment that relates to specific areas that we see as areas that are frequent comments that we make across the board. We can try to standardize the language of that, and even as if we can direct them to a specific learning center workshop connected to it, right?
Absolutely. I think if we at least by spring have 6 to 8, we'll start fairly
Yeah.
small, and that way we could have there'd be at least a video, which is one of the things that it takes a lot of time for everybody is making the videos, right? So it would at least humanize it, have a voice talking about this concept. It does help us with a little bit of commonality in terms of how things are explained and some of the terminology of the class, which is important for students to gather up. And yeah, so I hope we get, we'll farm it out to individuals, so they just have to do one. And
I think it's a great
Right.
way for students to get to know the department. I mean, I use Maggie's perusal video, and she starts off by saying, introducing herself. And so they see a face, in the division that they know, and they hear that teacher teach a little. And I think if we have a bunch of teachers doing them, it's a really great way for students to get to know us.
Absolutely.
And eventually maybe we could get the writing tutors in on it too, but we'll start with us, and then maybe we can get some peer tutors to take some of the fun ones.
Sure.
We are-
I know there's the embedded tutor meeting happening now too.
Yeah, we're at 1:00. Thank you all for coming. I was not sure if anybody would come on a Friday. It was really nice to see all of you and hear your ideas. And Piper, I hope you survive the DMV.
Yeah, that's DMV during COVID, man. That's
rough. That's brave.
That's a day. Wow.
All right.
Okay.
Everybody have a good weekend.
Yeah.
Thanks for
have a good
coming.
one. Bye-bye, everybody. Okay.